Welcome, dear colleagues. I'm very happy and proud to present you a very special tutorial today. We've analyzed hundreds of thousands of implants and their success. And we could see we had in general a very good success rate, about 97.5%. But when we checked all the failures we had in the past 10 to 23 years, they would actually fit into 5 categories. And out of those 5 categories, I've built a quick presentation. I'm going to present you now the 5 pillars of success. So that means if you follow those 5 pillars, you're going to create a super high success rate. Everything makes sense and everything is based on our analysis of the failures we all together as a community have made. We know failures is not always in the responsibility of the implantologist, but anyway, I believe we have got an extraordinary good working implant with SDS and the SDS shape, and because of that, I think we should be able to come super close to 100, and it showed in our smaller community, the Swiss BIOHEALTH CLINIC, that once we've started to follow those 5 pillars of success, our success rate went almost up to 100%. And in all my shadowings, I'm always applying all those 5 elements. Let's start with the first one. That is that always please use the longest implant possible. It makes absolutely no sense, for example, in a healed bicuspid side, in the upper posterior to place an 8 or 11 millimeter implant if there would be space enough for 11, 14, whatsoever. So always go for the longest implant, especially if you want to go for a one-piece implant or immediate loading, because your cornea heals totally inert, so there is no inflammation, and we have to create, I believe, a stronger stability in the first place to create a success as well in the 2P/2-stage implants. It's a tissue level implant. Of course, there is always the risk that the patient could bite on the implant with some food or touch it with the tongue whatsoever. So that's super important to always place the longest implant. It makes absolutely no sense to place short implants if there is enough volume in the bone. As well, please place the implant not too deep, especially those users coming from the bone level world. And as we could see, I call it back to the future. It started, implantology started with bone level, like the Straumann bone fit, where I started 33 years ago, placing those implants. They were the most successful titanium implants in history, but of course, after a while, they were not so beautiful anymore when you could see the black margin, and of course you were not allowed to prep it. But today we have got a white material, and you're, at least in the case of SDS, you're allowed to prep it and to adjust it to the gum line. So it's important not to place too deep, not underneath, so the prosthetic plateau should be at least on the highest point of the neighboring papilla. And then of course in the facial side and on the palate side, you would have to prep it a bit to follow the gum line and to create kind of a scallop implant. And that's a huge benefit of SDS, that we are allowed to prep it, you're allowed to prep it, and there is enough flesh on the bone, the wide and high tulip, that you could prep it according to the gum line, and therefore to create a perfect, nice emergence profile. And so rather go for a longer implant and let it stick out maybe a millimeter whatsoever out of the gum instead of using a shorter implant and place it too deep. That's the first pillar of success. Second pillar of success is we always have to take into account that the upper part of any implant sticks out of the mesoderm, the bone, through the ectoderm, the soft tissue, into the very dirty saliva. And this is what we call an exoprosthesis, and it's more or less the only exoprosthesis what we use in medicine. and it's actually it's a miracle anyway that it's working as good as it has worked the last 50 years. We know, especially in titanium, there's a high risk of perimplantitis because of that, because it's sticking out into this very dirty liquid, the saliva. Because of that, there should be no bone loss on the marginal bone coronally to the implant. And because of that, please do not apply any torque, rather create a little gap in between there, but never create any torque in this area. It should be 0 or even minus. What we mean is kind of a gap. In any immediate implants, the socket is always wider than the implant in this area, so there will be a gap anyway, and the blood, the information in the blood, the stem cells are taking care that those gaps will be filled with new bone, lamellar bone called callus bone with Haversian channels and a really nice angiogenesis and very good vascularization, what leads to a very healthy and stable bone in this super risky area, because this is in titanium, it's the problem that the soft tissue would never connect with the titanium, the gingiva. So for the rest of the life, we're going to have a kind of a leaky gut, a leaky gum in this area. And like in parodontosis, it's the same, we know. And so cornea, fortunately, is the only material what is known to connect with the soft tissue. But anyway, we want to have and to create and to build and to grow new lamellar bone in the marginal area. So I personally, in hard bone, I would rather move a little bit the countersink like this, so to create an even bigger gap there. So 0 to minus. But how should we get the implant stable? Of course, through the very aggressive thread, and now you might understand even better the shape of the implant I designed. The point is that the aggressive thread, this lower part is completely inside the body, completely inside the tissue. This is endoprosthesis, comparable to osteosynthesis screws, like when you repair like a bone fracture or a knee replacement or artificial hip, whatsoever. So that's much safer. And so we have started the past 12 months to create a quite strong torque in this area. So 35 is not the limit. 35, yes, 35 is the limit, but the minimum. And you could rather go above 35, 45, 50, 60, 70, something like that. Of course, I know our wretched kind of is blocked above 60, then you have to follow your feeling. But if you go, let's say, for 50, 55, it's just perfect. And this is why I created this super strong thread in the lower part, and actually our implant is the strongest implant in the world if it comes to the same diameter. So to give you an idea that two-piece ceramic implants, they've got like a tool what would break, insertion tool or transfer tool what would break before the implant would break or explode or flower, just name it. And so to avoid that the implant could break during the insertion, but we know sometimes it happens, and it happens around 45 to 50, 55 Newton centimeters in titanium. It happens in a 3.8 millimeter implant as well, between 70 and 90. I've actually, to be honest, I've destroyed some titanium implants in my, back then, 25 years in my titanium career. And our implant, the 3.8 two-stage implant, is going to break, to explode like above 180 Newton centimeters. So it's, as long as you take care that the insertion tool is perfectly adjusted to the implant, it's almost impossible to break it. And this is exactly what we are showing in our hands-on courses, that on one hand, so I call it the two basic fears of the implantologists. The first basic fear is in very hard bone, you want to get the implant down in the right place, and you're always a little bit afraid it could explode and it would be too much. And this will never happen in an SDS implant. It's so super stable. It's because of the material, but as well because of the very intelligent design with the microthread, what creates a really wide core in the implant, and all the connection in the two-stage implant is kind of placed, so the interface into the wide upper tulip, so you could put a lot of torque on there. The other thing is, since it has got a cone core with a parabol outline, we've got a really nice thread what will never spin, because that is the second basic fear of implantologists, that in soft bone they want to tighten it and get it pretty strong, a good nice primary stability, but at a certain point it will spin, and this will never ever happen in the SDS implant. And we are showing that in our hands-on courses, that in bone class 4 it will go down and down and further down, but never ever spin. So this is a really amazing thread, and I think it's important to understand that we want you to create a really strong primary stability in the lower part of the implant. That means in the aggressive thread, and with the countersink you would rather create a little bit of a gap. So that's the third pillar of the success. And the fourth is very similar to the third, but just in the upper posterior, because in our analysis of 122,213 implants we analyzed last summer in August, we found out, besides many other very important, very interesting findings, that like all the other implant systems, the highest failure rate we used to have in the upper posterior. Why? Because the bone there, even it's mostly a quite good volume and a very nice vascularization, the bone is very soft. And how could we improve that and create a similar stability then, like I showed in the third pillar of success? Very easy. You would just, in any situation in the upper posterior, if it's a late implant, a delayed implant, or immediate implant, you would use our osteotome and perform an internal lift. So you would just roll like 1 millimeter before the always super strong and hard bony sinus floor, and then you lift it for about 2 millimeters. You screw the implant in, and the nice thing is that exactly about 2 millimeters from the tip, there is the deepest point of the thread, and this is going to be in contact with a super hard and a strong sinus floor. And in this area you could as well create a stability, a torque of 35 to 70 Newton centimeters. And actually our implant, the SDS implant, is, if you compare it to other shapes, we've got about 200 to 300% of surface if you compare it to another implant with the same diameter and the same length, because of the angle of 7 degrees. Most of the other systems, they've got an angle of 15 degrees, so that doubles already. And second, we've got the deepest thread of all implant systems in this lower part of the implant, where we have created the aggressive thread, where you would go up to 35 to 70 Newton centimeters. And by using the internal lift, you will be able to create this in the upper posterior as well. And please never ever, no matter which implant system you're going to use, and if it's late, delayed, or immediate, always please combine it with the internal lift. It's not about creating more bone, of course, what you're going to do, but it's about getting a bicortical stability or a super high stability in the apical part of the implant, where is what is the endoprosthesis, where you could never overdo it. By applying this rule or this pillar of success, we have improved our success rate in the upper posterior. Now we've got the highest success rate in this area. Why? Because we've got the same primary stability than in all other areas, but we've got a nicer volume than in most of the other areas, and a really nice vascularization. So it's pretty easy and very helpful. Let's come to the fifth pillar of success. That is very interesting, because we are always wondering for years why ceramic implants in general, they show like 1% of less success in late implant sites. And this is because the titanium implant, as being a foreign body material, is going to heal into the bone by a chronic inflammation. And this helps, of course, because in an immediate implant, the bone is highly awake. It's all set up for building bone, building bone, building bone. All the osteoblasts are activated. That's the moment where you have to place the implant. It's going to heal anyway. And all the scale is on the side of the osteoblasts. But after a while, so we know there is not just atrophy in the volume, but there is as well an atrophy in the quality as well. So if you have a look at the histologies and you overlay them with the bone, you will see that already beginning after 6 months and then 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and so on, the bone becomes demineralized, degenerated. And after a while, you will see a kind of a fatty degenerative osteolysis in the bone, a demineralization, because it's not used anymore. It's not, it's like in your muscles. If you stop going to the gym, if you don't use it, you lose it. You're going to lose the mineralization of the bone, and the scale is on the side of the osteoclasts. And therefore, it's very hard to wake up the bone and to get the bone to become active and to start activate the osteoclast. Of course, we are supporting that with our micronutrients, with the supplements, with vitamin D3, K2, and C, and so on. But what is still missing in a totally inert material like the zirconia, what belongs to the group of the biomaterials, is the inflammation. Of course, we have got inflammation at the moment of the extraction, but not in a late implantation. So how could we get some inflammation in there? And as we know, there is a bad inflammation based on giant cells, what leads to tissue destruction. There is a good inflammation based on leukocytes, lymphocytes, monocytes, macrophages, what leads to proliferation and tissue growth. So any cut or whatsoever, any damage on your skin or in your mouth, on your gum, the first step always is inflammation. The second step is proliferation. The third is tissue growth. So let's think how we could get some good inflammation in there to create very good success rate as well in late implantation. And that's easy, the PRF. It should be the PRF matrix / membrane, not the PRGF, because there are no leukocytes in the PRGF, and as well not the exudate, because in the exudate as well there is no leukocytes. So you have to go for the PRF membrane if it's the liquid or it's the solid, doesn't matter, could be IPF as well, but not the exudate. And by putting that in the late drilling socket for the implant cavity, you're creating the good inflammation, and but with the huge benefit that not like in titanium, the inflammation, chronic inflammation is going to stay for the rest of the life. No, it's going to change into proliferation and tissue growth within the coming 10 to 20 days. And since we are doing so, our success rate in late implantation in zirconia went up to at least the same success rate than what we had in titanium 25 years ago. So that's a good idea, and I personally do it in any socket before I place the implant as well. In immediate implants, I place a piece of a PRF membrane and then I screw the implant in. So those are the 5 pillars of success, and I can promise you, if you follow those 5 pillars, your success rate is going to go very close to 100%. And if you go back to your own failures, like I did, like we did, like SDS did, you will see that almost all, maybe 99% of your failures are falling into one of the 5 elements or groups what created for us the 5 pillars of success. So Always the longest implant possible, not too deep, rather let it stick out a little bit in the part of the exoprosthesis, in the marginal bone in the upper part, like in the microthread area, 0 to minus, better a gap than a lot of torque. In the lower part, very strong torque, at least 35, and you could go up to 70. And in the upper posterior, you are going to create this torque by the internal sinus lift. And at least in the late implantation, please place a PRF membrane. So I'm very sure that this is going to help you to create a very high success rate. And I hope you enjoyed it. Please apply it on your next implantations and let me know about your results and about your ideas. Thank you.